Welcome to the channel. My name's Greg. I'm really excited about the video I have for you today. I'm making Saucisson d'Arles, which basically is a super simple salami. This Saucisson d'Arles, not only did it come out really good, but this has a secret ingredient. Traditional Saucisson d'Arles has no spices, so it really relies on the quality of the meat and the manufacturing techniques. So manufacturing techniques basically means keeping everything really cold while working on it, making sure your cutter blades are sharp so that everything comes out well defined. I'm using a Berkshire-Hampshire cross pig that my friend raised using all local feed. A little bit of beef in here is organic grass-fed beef from a local farm. The thing that makes this so special, makes me so excited about this, is that this fat is infused with truffles. That's right, truffle-infused pork fat from local Oregon truffles. Let me show you how I infused the pork fat, and then I'll get into showing you how I made this salami. Let's do this. What I have here is some Oregon white truffles my neighbor gave me. I'm really excited about these. I really wish I could invent smell-o-vision because these smell amazing. Well, generally, you don't cook with truffles, and actually you don't mix them that much with things. You more use them to infuse their flavor. That's how they're typically used. Let's check out what I have here. I've cubed up pork fat, relatively small, because the more surface area, the better it will be for this infusion process. So don't have a great way of hanging these truffles in here. I put this container, paper towel on top, just to keep these truffles elevated. And what I'm doing, I'm going to take a fresh paper towel. I'm just going to wrap each one of these up in its own towel so they're not touching each other. Truffles have a very, very short shelf life. Take one more paper towel, wrap them all up in that one to hold them in place. That'll work. My friend suggested poking holes in a Tupperware, putting that in the cooler, and holes for some air, but then you put them in a cooler and close the cooler, so that's going to cut off the air. So I did some research online, and I think as long as I replace this towel a couple times a day, at least once every 24 hours, I've been doing it once every 12 hours, I'll still get a few days out of this truffle before it starts to go funny. Close that. I'm going to put this in the refrigerator. I'm going to change that paper towel every 12 hours. Hopefully it'll get a few days. This has been one day. This is my second paper towel change. And I can tell you, I think this pork fat's already starting to have a truffle smell. So I'm really excited to make a salami out of this pork fat. Okay, into the refrigerator you go. Truffles don't last very long, especially in this non-air environment. But I changed out my paper towel a couple times a day for the first 3 days. And for the last day, I put it in salt. It was my son's idea. He thought it would help it maybe last a little longer, draw out some of the moisture. I'm not sure, but they feel firm enough to still use. And this fat here, definitely infused with the truffle flavor. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take some out for the salami I'm making now, and I'm going to vacuum seal some of it to use later, and I'll freeze that again. And yes, you'll notice there's 3 truffles now. I started with 4, now there's 3. The one of them got a little soft, so I pulled that out. Now, my friend who gave me these said that after I'm done infusing, what he likes to do is to microplane them into some butter to put on bread, or put them in the middle of some brie cheese. So I'm going to microplane these onto some brie cheese here. Oh yeah. I don't even know how much to put on there. It seems like maybe a lot. Yeah, that's kind of a bit. Like I'm going to put the rest into some butter. I like to mix up some mold 600, otherwise known as Penicillium nalgiavensis. And I like to mix this up the night before I'm going to use it. Gives it a little time to wake up. And it's just going to take about 1/4 teaspoon. Notice I'm pouring it out. I'm not sticking my spoon into the mold because I don't want to contaminate it. So when I'm done, I just fold it back up to tape it, like to try to make sure I get air out. And then I vacuum seal it and keep it in the freezer. And then I add about a quarter cup of clean, fresh water. I have good well water. If you're working off of like a municipal system, probably best to use distilled water. Chlorine will kill this. So I'm just gonna cover that, set it aside. It'll be ready in the morning. So I'm gonna start with some pork. I'm using a picnic ham. I recommend getting a good quality pork for any kind of salami since you're gonna have a bit of time invested in it. And the salami, or salami really, concentrates the flavor as it dries. So I definitely would recommend getting the best pork you can for any salami. But this one in particular is a very basic salami. There's no spice profile. Just salt, a little bit of sugar to feed the starter culture, and that's it. So starting with a really quality animal is really important for this. I'm going to keep just cutting this into pieces that fit into my grinder, and I'll be back. I'm using the picnic ham, and this is pretty fatty for a picnic ham. That's why I'm reducing the percentage of fat I'm using as pure fat. And this might be a little fatty for a salami, but I really like fat. Fat's flavor. I'm going to add about a quarter teaspoon of my T-SPX starter culture, about 20 to 30 minutes before I want to use it. And then I like to just tape that back up. A little piece of tape holding that down. I'm going to put that in a vacuum seal bag and refreeze it. I like to use these. It's like a hybrid Ziploc bag. It's got that little, if you have one of these tools, this will suck the air out. So it's pretty reusable. And I'm going to add about a quarter cup of clean water. Again, like the mold, if you're on a municipal water supply that uses chlorine, you're definitely going to want to get yourself some distilled water for this. I'll just set that aside for 20 to 30 minutes while I grind up some meat. Got here is my picnic ham. Already, it's pretty frozen. It's pretty firm. This is a little more fatty than I was realizing. This is going to be a fatty salami. I don't mind. I like the fat. If you're not that into the fat, you might want to find a different hobby. I've also got a little bit of beef. Again, you want to use quality ingredients for making this because it's so simple. This is grass-fed organic beef. A little bit that I trimmed off of some other projects I did. Combination of some round, using some of the chain from the filet I made my beef Wellington out of. Oh, look at that. Oh, look at the marbling in that. That's some really nice looking beef. And I got my truffle infused pork fat ready to go. Oh man, that smells good like truffles. Had my grinder parts in the freezer for a little while. I'll be starting out with this 10mm die. I'm going to switch bowls real quick. Run my beef and pork through this. And then before I change out my plate, I'm going to grind a little bit of beef just for a snack burger. Now I'm going to run this back through my 4.5mm die. That's just going to go straight back into the big bowl. This is really all about the texture. If you want to grind your fat small, do it. I like getting these big fat pieces. I like getting these really big pieces of fat. They're going to taste like truffle. It's going to be delicious. Like to take a little bit, just ball it up real quick, throw that back through. That just helps push out the last bit, just like that. I'm going to stick this back in the freezer while I cook up that snack burger and wash this grinder. If you let this sit, gets to be a little difficult to wash. Saucisson d'Arles is a super simple, just a pure salami. Nothing but salt. Cure number 2, a little bit of dextrose to feed the starter culture right away. Dextrose is a simple sugar, readily accessible for the starter culture to eat. And a little bit of sugar, also for the starter culture to eat. It's not as readily accessible, but it will consume this sugar as well. As it consumes the sugars, it will produce lactic acid, and that's what will lower the pH. Getting the pH below 5.3 is one of the safety hurdles. So that's all I'm using. No spices, just salt to preserve it and sugar to feed the cultures. And then I'm using the T-SPX, which is a slow fermenter and a mild acidifier, so that won't even add a whole lot of flavor to it either. Be a minimal amount of tanginess. Should let that truffle infused fat really shine through. All right, my meat is down below 31. It's 30 degrees. That's plenty cold. Anything below 35 will work just great. 30 degrees is pretty cold, which is why I put on these liners underneath my gloves. I'm just going to try to even out some of this fat to start. I'm just going to add my salt cure, and the sugars. I'm going to start getting that a little bit mixed in. I'm smelling that truffle already. I'm pretty excited about this. I've used truffle salt before and that comes out really good, but I think this freshly infused fat is going to be a whole nother level. I'm going to go in with my T-SPX starter culture. Now I'm just going to mix this until it gets nice and sticky. Salami is a little different than mixing sausage. Sausage is much looser. Salami, there's very little extra liquid added. It's a much stiffer batter. It's a little trickier to mix. If you wanted to use a stand mixer, that would work. This batch is a little too big for my stand mixer. It's a combination of turning it, kneading it, squeezing it, just getting it to come together. It's starting to get there, but I can still see sort of voids in here, see? Starting to have little strands coming off, but you can see there's like cracks and fissures still sort of in the mix. You really want to mix it until there's no more cracks and fissures showing in there. So it's really, really homogeneous. Starting to lift the bowl and get sticky, but there's still little cracks and fissures in there. I think I'm likely to get air pockets in my salami. You don't want that. Yeah, but I think it's getting there. Feeling like squeezed out any of the air pockets. Definitely lifting my bowl, sticking to my hand real well. Honestly, it's starting to want to sort of pull my gloves off. You can see it starts to look almost fuzzy. It's got little strands that reach out. I feel like I've gotten rid of any of the most of the fissures and cracks. I think this is good enough. I'm going to load this into my stuffer, start stuffing. So I'm just going to take handfuls of this and just try to push all the air out I can. You do want to work pretty hard to get the air out because it is a bit stiffer of a batter, or farce is what they're actually called. Just like mixing it, it seems like you got to work just a little harder to get that air out than you would with a sausage. You can see it's pretty sticky. It's really kind of pulling my gloves off. All right, I'm going to get the stuffer set up, switch around my camera, be right back. I'm going to be using these 61 millimeter protein lined fibrous casings. Bought some pre-tied ones this time. Got these soaking about half hour before I want to use them, just in some cold water. as always, lube it up, and then I'm just gonna feed it on there. Punch a couple holes in the end to let any air out. And then I'm just gonna start stuffing. And I wanna get this as really pretty tight. Really don't want any air in there. And these fibrous casings are pretty rugged, they're pretty durable. Although I did find out on my very first video, you can break them. Once it's full, just gonna twist it as tight as I can. Take my string, and this is a little tricky, take some practice. I like to just make an overhand knot and come through a second time. And it's tricky to hold it tight while tying it. But, like I said, with some practice, you can get it done. So then I do another knot, and I fold this over, make another knot on top of that. And what that does is it creates this little bubble here on the top, that little nub, and that's going to keep it from, it's going to keep this knot from slipping off. And I'm just going to poke some holes in here. That's going to help it dry out, help the casing stick a little better. I'm going to stuff my other one. I'll bring you back when I'm done with that. Going to take a little bit that was left in my hopper. Just going to wrap it up in some plastic. Stick it on here. I'm going to take my mold that I mixed up first thing, and I'm just going to brush it on. You could spray it on. If you had a lot of salamis, you could just dip it, I suppose. I think this is the most efficient way to use the mold. And then if I have some left over, I'll probably just spray it into my curing chamber. Take some plastic wrap. Just going to cover this up. This particular T-SPX starter culture should be over 90% humidity, and really about 65 degrees should be fine. So just leaving it out on the counter, on the table here. Probably going to take about 3 days, and we'll check the pH at that time. See you in a few days. Been 72 hours. See, I got my mold starting to grow everywhere. It's not touching the plastic or the tray or each other. A couple little stripes of it. It'll take off pretty good as soon as I put it into the drying chamber. These little balls here, I dunked them in some wine and then coated them in cornmeal. I made just a little more than would fit in my casing, so that's what I did with those. And let's check out the pH here. See, the texture is much firmer, almost rubbery. It's got a mildly fermented smell. And let's see what our pH is saying. Yep, 5.2. Well, some people say it should be under 5.2. Mariansky say under 5.3. I'm going to say this is good right at 5.2. I don't really want it to get that acidic. That's why I used the T-SPX culture that I used. I'll probably coat this one in cornmeal too, even though it's pretty small. It'll probably dry real fast. We'll see. My next step is going to be to weigh these, make some tags, and get them in my drying chamber. My drying chamber stays about 55 degrees Fahrenheit and about 80% humidity. It does say 84% now, but that's the sound it makes when it turns on. When this turns on, this drops down to the low 70s. But it averages about 80% humidity. This is where I've been hanging my Truffle Infused Saucisson de Arles, and I'm quite excited to give these a taste. All right, well, this has been in my drying chamber for 4 months now. 4 months to the day. It's got a nice coating of Penicillium nogiavensis on it. This is at 37% weight loss, which correlates to about 37% moisture loss. I usually let my salamis go to more like 40%, but this is just really slowed down to a point where it is barely drying. So I think it's time to cut it open and give it a taste. Start just cutting the ends off. Oh, wow. All right. It's looking pretty damn good to me. Sometimes these come off pretty well, pretty easy. Other times it helps to soak them, but this looks like it's going to come off real easy. Oh, yeah. I'm really excited about this one here. That is looking awesome to me. Tiny bit of air hole right there, but other than that, it looks to be bound really well. Even color outside to the inside. No real dry ring, or not even no real dry ring. There's just no dry ring, which means my chamber is running pretty well, pretty consistent, good moisture, not too dry. Let's give it a slice, give it a taste. Taste the truffle and the fat. It's not overpowering, but it's the only flavor in here other than the meat, and I'm tasting it. Well, if you've seen some of my other videos, you may have seen me using truffle salt to make truffle salamis, and that works really well. And usually, truffle salt is accessible. Fresh truffles, not always accessible, and they're very expensive usually when they are. So the truffle salt is a very good way to make a truffle salami. Nothing wrong with it. Definitely gives you the truffle flavor. But this, it's just the freshness of the truffle. I don't know how to explain it. I mean, the truffle's only in the fat too, so that's one difference. It's when you use the truffle salt, the truffle gets into everything. Whereas this is really only in the fat. But look, we got a really nice bind. I love these big pieces of fat. Like I was saying, there's no dry ring. It's the uniform color throughout. And it's interesting, the test pieces I made, the test piece and the little ones that were coated with cornmeal, obviously they dried quite a bit sooner than these. They had a real truffle aftertaste, but not a lot of truffle in the front. Whereas this, when you eat it, this has a real truffle forward. That's the flavor. Catch it right away. You don't have to wait for the aftertaste for it. Oh my God. That is just amazing. Using really good pork from the Berkshire-Hampshire cross. These truffles are local and fresh. Obviously, they have to be fresh because they only stay good for a few days. Local, organic, grass-fed beef. I mean, I'm using the best meat I can get. I'm using fresh truffles, which I can only imagine how much it would cost if I had to buy that. But luckily, I got friends that watch out for me, and I'll have to give them some of the salami. That's kind of how it works. But it's a great deal. I don't even know how to put this into words. I guess if I were to say anything, eating this, to get to experience this, this is unique. You can't buy this in a store. Maybe you can somewhere, but I kind of doubt it. I mean, this is super special. Okay, well, this isn't something I can make every day because I can't get truffles that often. It's a special thing when it happens. But I will have to say, this truffle-infused Saucisson d'Arles, hands down, this is the best salami I've ever made. And the cool thing is, I still have some truffle-infused pork fat left. I have a video, Polish method salami, or the traditional salami. Polish salami traditional method, I think is what it's called. It is slow fermented without the addition of a starter culture. I think I'm going to use some of this truffle-infused fat to make a salami like that, with no other flavors, but with no starter culture. Because even though this is very mildly acidified, it's got a little bit more of the tang than that other one would have. And yeah, I'm going to try one with just salt and this truffle-infused fat. So that'll probably be coming up in another, 4-6 months. It takes a little while to make this stuff. But this is a freaking awesome salami. If you learned anything from this video or just found it entertaining, make sure to give it a big old thumbs up. If you're still watching this video at this point, you should definitely be subscribed to my channel if you aren't already. You'd like a lot of my other content, I'm pretty sure. If you want to support what I'm doing, go ahead and drop me a super thanks. I would sure be thankful for that. And whatever it is you do, make sure to put some love into the food you're making. Peace.